p.m. on Monday, July 29th, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum present. If we could, I'd like to stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If I could ask our new superintendent, Stacy Buckley, whom I'd like to welcome to our school board officially this evening at her first meeting, to tell us about the notice of posting and where it was posted.
We have posted the notice of the meeting at the SAU office, on the website, all the schools, and it was sent to all the town offices for posting as well.
Okay, thank you. Again, welcome from everyone. At this juncture, we have at this point in time, we have a non-public session scheduled to go in for a couple of hours, actually. We anticipate being back just before 8 p.m. this evening. And as a result of what we have scheduled, we plan to stay here in the Library Media Center. So at this point in time, I would entertain a motion to enter non-public for the three reasons cited on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Ruby. I will now call the roll. Alexandria, excused. Bridgewater, yes. Bristol.
Yes.
Danbury.
Yes.
Groton.
Yes.
Hebron.
Yes.
New Hampton.
Here.
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll enter non-public at 6:03 p.m. Okay, it is now approximately 8:15 p.m. and we are reconvening from our non-public session on Monday, July 29th. I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance. And we are at item 3, 8:15 p.m., moving on to item 4, and that is for the approval of modification of agenda. I understand Mr. Rossner has a modification.
If you would consider adding this small item to the agenda, I had told you at a previous meeting I'd be ready in August to present an option for you about retaining a portion of the fund balance as you've been authorized to do.
Yes.
I'm ready for that tonight, and it would be expeditious if we were to do so for finalizing the audit, which was recently completed to draft form.
Okay, and that was Article 4 that was approved at
Correct.
deliberative session,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I've reviewed the capacity for the motion with the DRA, got a document from them authorizing us to do so, and also I have the unassigned fund balance as it stands at the draft audit, and so I have a motion, a recommended motion if you chose to take this up.
Okay, I would be okay with adding that as item 9Z, 9Z1 if there's no other business. Any objection? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is modified accordingly. Moving on to item 5, intercommunications. First of all, before we do that, I just wanted to publicly thank Mr. Rossner for his assistance at the year-end barbecue that we had at our last meeting, the day of our last meeting on June 17th. He coordinated all of the resources and provided all of the, essentially most of the labor, and I appreciate that, Dan. We're going to
My pleasure.
miss that commitment. I'd ask everyone under item 5A to sign in. There is one clipboard that is vertical and one that is horizontal at the table. If you haven't signed in, if you wouldn't mind, please doing so. Usually we have those up front here a little more conveniently. For those that are attending, just print your name and town. And then those will get returned to our clerk for recording of attendance. Those of you who want to receive regular school board packets, please record your request on the designated sheet that's there, or simply send an email to Susan Cross at the SAU office. That's scross@sau4.org. Under 5C, at this point, we're at public comment, which is not limited to agenda items. I do not see any elected officials in the audience this evening, so if there are members of the public that would like to speak, I would invite you to do so. Just state your name and town. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, and we do not have a faculty or staff liaison present this evening, and we do not have a student council representative present this evening, which brings us on to item 6A. School board minutes for approval from the minutes of June 17th. I have a few corrections, and I would bet a few others have some too. Anyone want to go first? If not, I would direct your attention to item 12. Oh, I'm sorry, did you?
That's okay, well, either way, you get the ones that you want to get, maybe.
All right, item 12Z3 was moved by Paul Reinhardt, and that this was on action to elect Joanna Marcotte to ICT specialist for Bridgewater Village Hebron School. The motion was approved, but on a 6-to-1 vote. It was not an abstention. I believe Groton voted in the minority. Is that correct, Jeff?
That is correct.
That's a correction. Did you get that, Sue? The other thing I believe Sue has already corrected is on the non-public session minutes. We state the school board member election year term, and that's been corrected for both Suzanne Cheney and myself to the year 2016 for Alexandria and Bridgewater, respectively. Anyone else have corrections? Sue?
Okay, just a couple of minor things, I think. On 7, item 7, down where it says chairs of subcommittees to include, wait a minute. Where I
Yeah.
am.
To
I think to include in minutes, I think.
well, included is,
Right, but included
Wrong.
is wrong, but it seems to me it should be to include in minutes.
Yeah,
Like that,
in the
okay,
minutes, right?
In the minutes.
Yeah.
Place of meetings and
Right.
finish time.
or maybe
Start times.
put in the minutes at the end of the sentence. How's that read to you?
I think to include in the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other corrections?
Let's see, down on 9, let's see, the second bullet, noted the laws have changed, needs a D. I think I had another here. No. Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, any further corrections? Hearing none.
Make a motion on minutes be accepted as amended.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, moved by Paul, seconded by Sue. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the vote is 7-0-0, and with no one absent. The minutes are approved, they're amended and approved under 6A. Under 7, no action required, but there are minutes in green for the policy committee meeting of June 6th and RSA 195 subcommittee meeting of June 11th that are included in the packet. Any comment or concern with those? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 8, correspondence and reports included in the packet. by the way, this is Superintendent Buckley's first meeting with us, and at the very beginning of the meeting, we welcomed her attendance and greeted her accordingly. So,
Is the letter from the student part of this section, correspondence and reports? The letter about fencing in the basketball court, it's in purple, so I don't know if we're supposed to be
If I could
discussing
just offer one
it.
comment, it's not a student,
It's a
it's an
parent.
adult.
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I think, Dan, this is an FYI, right? Did you
Yeah.
take care of this?
I thought you'd want to receive it as correspondence. He wrote the letter to me, so I forwarded it to you. I did write back to him in an email format saying, you know, I'm going to move this to the school board, just so you're aware, but I want you to be aware in advance that should they move on it, I would advise them to, if they were to allow you to construct any fencing, that it be of substantial nature, to code, well-constructed, et cetera. So we're not talking about running a plastic rope around the court here, and you're conceivably talking about thousands of dollars in expense. So if you have any thoughts about that before the school board considers your request, please feel free to respond to this email, and I never heard back. But I thought that was a prudent thing to do, to advise them of what my recommendations to you would be if you were to contemplate the request.
We own that property?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I thought it was park.
No,
Or
the
shared.
basketball court, with the basketball court and a portion of Kelly Park, what is the fields of Kelly Park, are part of the middle school parcel. I recently, because of the issue with the playground and the safety inspection that happened to the playground, what used to be playground equipment at the middle school, I recently had, past year I had a surveyor walk the line with me. I didn't want to invest in a full set of drawings, but I did have a surveyor familiar with the drawings to walk the line with me, so I know where the actual line is, and I can point to it, and I've done so with 2 or 3 people in district so far. Anyone else who's interested in knowing more about that property line, I'd be happy to make the time to walk it.
Okay.
So, at such time, if this occurs, we would probably have some further input, or some kind of approval on the type of.
Well, depending
Well-
on what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want locks there, and I would want it easily accessible.
Yeah, I don't think he's looking to lock it. I think he's looking to
Yeah.
prevent having to chase the ball if it goes
Ball.
past the basket, to be
Yeah,
honest
so
with
it's
you.
probably
But
that
what
end,
cost is that?
really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
we'll take it up at
Yeah.
a future meeting if he
If he
responds.
Yeah,
I think that's the correct course of action.
Thank you for handling that.
Did you request that he provide a design?
Nope. I didn't see that as my job. I saw just advising him what my recommendation to the board would be if they consider the request. You know, any sort of requirements you put upon him, I'm happy to communicate for you if you make those decisions, but I didn't see that as my role.
I thought it was a great idea. You know, if he can come up with the money.
Well, it's his, ball's in his court,
Yeah.
pun intended.
Yeah.
Not often enough, that's the problem.
Any other commentary on the reports or correspondence that we have? Care to share the summary of the LAG, or the LGC trust info, Dan?
Sure. It's been in the news a lot lately, that, on the radio and print news, that as part of a administrative hearing officer's order, the local governments, what was formerly known as local government center, is actually now legally known as Health Trust, or the Profit PLT Trust, will be returning surplus premiums from previous years to a variety of member organizations, of which Newfound Area School District is one. One portion, which is, if you look at the document that I included in your packet, the medical insurance return from premium calendar year 2011, approximately $116,000. That was a known number as we went through the budget cycle last fall, and was budgeted for as a reduction, is being taken as a credit to the expense of the health insurance accounts in the month of August 2013. Next month, we received those invoices today, and the credit was there. So there's really not much to do with that, other than I wanted you to be aware that we did the math of figuring out what portion was really due to be returned to the employees versus what portion would be the employers to keep based on each employee's individual contribution versus the total contribution, et cetera. The other three portions that are depicted on this sheet, both the dental insurance return for 2011, as well as the dental insurance return for 2010, and the medical insurance return for 2010, which is the largest number by far, those numbers were not known, nor had they been declared by the board of directors of those organizations during our budget season. So that is what could be termed as unanticipated revenue. My strong belief is that it's appropriate to carry the same calculation through, return the portion, the equitable portion to the employees, and then the balance, which is about $300,000, stays with the district. My intent would be to report that. The process is, in September, we file something called, in addition to filing the annual report that details fund balance, et cetera, for the previous fiscal year, in September we file something called the updated anticipated revenues form. It's form MS-24. And my intent, unless I were directed otherwise, would be to include that $300,000 as revenue that will be coming in. We'll already received it by then. We'll receive it during the month of August. Revenues coming in that were not anticipated when the budget was originally built. Thereby, it would immediately reduce the basis for which the tax bills will be calculated for this coming December to the local population. There are other strategies. There are some districts who are choosing not to report it as additional unanticipated revenue, but rather to take it, much like we sometimes take increased grant revenues, and spend it, and increase the overall threshold of appropriation because it's not having a local effect on taxation. So that's really your choice, given my perception of the board's philosophy about stuff like this. I'm telling you what I'll do unless you direct me otherwise, which is record it as unanticipated revenue and reduce the taxation for this fall.
Anyone have a problem with that?
And the employees will just see it as a reduction in their premium?
What we'll do is, the employees, typically on a paycheck, you have your gross wages and there's various deductions for federal taxes and what have you, including a deduction for the employees' portion of their health insurance. What our strategy is going to be is to let the first back-to-school paycheck pass through so people know what their standard paycheck looks like. And then on the second paycheck in September, we will put it through as a credit, or a negative deduction, if you will, in that same line item, and they'll have additional revenue. The employees will see additional revenue as well, as a one-time thing.
With an explanation, to be sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, ordinarily, at this time, we would also have a report from our special ed administrator that would be included in the packet, and I wanted to just take a moment to officially welcome Ann to the district and say that we're glad to have you, and welcome you here this evening. So we do have an item on the agenda for you to speak to us about, which would be to talk about the quarterly report. This is actually the second report, which we're doing by calendar quarter, that you can speak to when the time comes. So,
And just for the record, Dan actually did this one
yeah,
prior to my arrival, but I can speak to some other issues.
sure. Okay, well, we wanted to welcome you and give you a spot on the agenda, so.
Thank you.
Any further commentary on correspondence and reports? Okay, hearing none, we are now on to policies for first reading. I have a question before we go into 9A. Under 9C, that one was provided a first reading, was it
Yes,
not?
we gave that for a first reading. Because we've revised it, included it in one of the policies, JCA, that we're gonna get tonight,
Okay,
first reading, we're pulling that up. So
Got it.
basically what we're doing is we're not gonna create a new policy,
okay.
we're gonna add stuff to one that already exists.
Okay, just for clarification for those that might be following the policy alphabet soup, I just wanted to bring that up. So we're now at 9A under policies for first reading. Is there any comment on any of the three policies listed? And for those of you at home, we're looking at practice management of negative student lunch account balances at all district schools, the healthy school wellness policy, and the change of school assignment.
I think it would be important for the people listening at home for Stacy to explain the state regulation about change of school assignment, as she did to us.
Okay?
One of the things we had a lengthy conversation in the policy committee was around policy JCA and the proposed policy JECE on school choice, and the notion that the RSA already talks, there's an RSA that speaks to change of school assignments and makes it very clear on what that looks like, and that we needed to probably integrate those two policies, because you don't really, the school district doesn't have necessarily school choice or what you would consider like an open enrollment where any parent can pick any school. You really had school choice because of the notion of Title I. When the waiver was accepted by the feds, school choice went away, as did schools in need of improvement, as did district in need of improvement. All of those sanctions went away, and so school choice really is negligible at this point in time. What this policy allows for is a student, for specific reasons, would be allowed to attend a different school. I do think this will help us get a better grasp on where our kids are. We have about 50 students right now that are not in their assigned school.
And that exceeds the percentage allowed by state law.
By a
More
lot.
than 4 times. More
Yes.
than 4 times what's allowed.
Yeah.
We really shouldn't be considering swapping kids around.
Right, and so we've spoken, at the committee level, we spoke about the process for that and really trying to get a better handle, taking out of the principal's hands of having to make those individual decisions, not looking at the big picture. And so it will become the role and responsibilities of the superintendent to gather all that data. We're now asking parents, in the past it has been once you got accepted to a school, that's not in your enrollment area per se, you were able to stay there, you didn't have to reapply. The change in policy will request you to reapply every single year, because one of the things we want to do is look at numbers holistically in schools and not have to hire teachers in one school because more kids want to go there, and be able to really look at the picture. So it would be my intent, if this policy was approved, to send this out to all students to parents of all students who are in the wrong school, so that they were aware of the change of policy, that next year they will need to reapply. Because we do really need to get a handle on where students are and enrollment numbers, and be able to predict a little bit better. So that was kind of the genesis of adding in policy JEC combined to this, because it also does provide us with some parameters. I think that was the big change, and as well as that the request was granted for 1 year, and that they would need to reapply every year
And
before June 1.
And we were okay with the idea of grandfathering kids that are
Yep.
already in a school so they don't have to move. But 12 is our limit for kids that should be moving to schools they're not assigned to. And we have 50, so,
And that's based on the RSA.
yeah.
So, I just had one slight correction,
Oops.
typo. JCA, change of school assignment, on 3C, it should say extenuating, I believe.
Yes.
Also, number 8 needs a period.
I can't find extenuating. Okay, so we'll amend that. 8 period. Any other comments on the policies for first reading?
I think it's probably important that we address EFR, as that is a new policy.
Okay, comments?
Dan, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to handle it?
Your choice. It was a request that I made that a policy of some sort addressing student negative balances be implemented, as we had none. It's a challenge every year to, because among other things, it's illegal for the food service
What's the
fund or
first
Fund
one?
21 to carry receivables from year to year. We're required to liquidate those at the year end, so essentially what we do is, what we've done the last 2 years since this was determined, is Fund 10 buys the receivable from Fund 21 at year end. And then, so everyone has to, the food service fund has to start with a clean slate for everyone with the new year. So then I've been chasing these small receivables for the last couple of years, and we get the old money in, we deposit it to Fund 10. However, there are accounts that have gotten increasingly more delinquent, and it's been a challenge without policy to enforce any sort of strict limit. I was asked, prior to Stacy joining the district, I was asked to go out and find a sample policy, and I contacted a woman who I know who is, turned out is the food service director in Goffstown, Megan Bizzaro, and she provided me with this one, which I thought was really well put together. I asked policy to review it. They had a couple of comments. I asked Phil Dallin, our food service director, to review it. He had a comment or two, such as the vegetable being included in the alternate meal and changing it from an emergency meal to an alternative lunch. But other than that, it's gone through policy, and I think it'll be beneficial to have, especially with the policy of being able to communicate directly with the parents once we hit that $5 threshold, more directly, try to keep these balances in better control.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work getting it put together.
My pleasure.
I also note that we have a healthy school wellness policy finally for our first reading after much effort.
Yes, that was supposed to be included with the other policy, and it just didn't make it. The changes have been noted in bold and crossed out. The old text has been crossed out with the new bold text added. Basically, it's just adding a few new acts to the description of what we're trying to comply with, and streamlining the philosophy a little bit.
Any other comments on 9A, three policies listed? Hearing none, moving on to 9B, policies for second reading. These are with respect to home education instruction, school board member indemnification, healthy school wellness policy procedures, co-curricular programs, and interscholastic athletics. They're up for second reading this evening, which means if we take action and approve these, they will become policy after the meeting.
Just wanted to note that we were asked on IGD to check and make sure it included middle school grades, and our policy is not grade specific, so it applies to all programs.
I had a couple of typos on JLCFP under nutrition, B, nutrition, on the first page, second line. I think we need to take out the "and" before resistance.
Number 1, please.
It's 1B, sorry. Nutrition, yeah, it's right on that first page.
You want to take out the,
Take out the "and" before resistance, because it's the
Oh,
last,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
the last in line is.
yeah,
Okay. And there was just another thing on the next page, or the back of that page, excuse me. That would be number 5. Okay, starting nutrition services. At the end of that line, hands-on, isn't that 2 words?
or hyphenated, yeah.
Yeah. That's all.
Anything else? Okay, we're now at item 9C, which is the policy for removal, which is school choice, having already had a first reading. Comments?
Isn't this just advisory? We never,
It was never an actual policy.
right. So we are
It was
not
recommended for
representing.
first read.
Right.
But we did approve it for first reading, correct?
Correct.
And then we sent it back to policy over some concerns, and so,
Well, I'd like to be on record as voting it to be removed.
okay,
Or removed from consideration.
Yeah,
okay.
because the way it got back to committee, I think, was understandably necessary. Okay, we're at 9D, job description.
Just want to clarify that the technology coordinator job description is a second reading. And the superintendent of schools is a new item.
Can I add too that Dan pointed out you actually approved the technology position at your last meeting.
Yeah, I
and
thought
I don't
we
think we
did.
made any changes. If you look at the minutes from the last meeting, we had actually approved it.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Well,
don't
it
know
says
that-
June
And I don't know that there were
17th.
any changes that were made in between.
I don't think they were. Do you do a second reading for job descriptions? I thought it was just
No.
one-time approval.
Yeah, it's an approval, so it's not just a technicality, it's not a reading at all, it's just an item on the agenda that, as is shown in the minutes, we approved on June 17th.
Yep.
That should actually be
In those minutes.
eliminated from the agenda, I should have caught that. The superintendent of schools job description has been modified though, right?
Yes.
And this is what we have before us this evening.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to put any of the things you previously discussed on the consent agenda?
Yes, actually, we should have asked, is there, thank you, Dan, is there any objection to items 9A, B, being on the consent agenda, and C for that matter, which is for removal? Hearing none, we'll put items 9A, B, and C on the consent agenda. Little rusty, been 6 weeks since we've met. Been a little vacation. Any changes or discussion on the job description for the superintendent of schools? Without objection, can we add that to the consent agenda? Anyone object? That would include 9D as well, Dan.
Got it.
Stacy, just for procedural purposes, you're free to delegate this task to the business.
I did, he's doing a great job over there. I wrote consent agenda on the top.
Nice.
Okay. We're under 9E at this point, which is under resignations. Stacy?
Yep, I'm bringing forward the resignation of Janice Swanson, who is the part-time guidance counselor at Danbury Elementary School, and I make the recommendation to the board to accept her resignation.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, is there any objection to including 9E on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we will add 9E to the consent agenda. We're now at 9F, under personnel, new hires.
And I'll do this in two pieces. The first piece would be bringing forward Julie Mahoney as a special education teacher at Bristol Elementary School.
Okay, this is gonna be 9F1. Julie Mahoney. And then under 9F2, we have other nominations.
I'm bringing forward Melissa Markey as a first grade teacher at Bridgewater Hebron. Murphy Rainville as a second grade teacher at Bartlett Elementary School, Bristol Elementary School. I get the BS right. And Sarah Ohl, who will be here at the high school as a family and consumer science teacher, .75.
Should we speak now to why they're separated?
You can, yeah, if
Okay.
you'd like, if you want to discuss the
Sure.
separations.
I asked that Julie be separate because she's my childhood best friend. I didn't know that she had applied for a job here, so I'm gonna abstain from the vote to hire her.
I also asked that it be separated out. My wife served last year as the temporary long-term substitute for the position and interviewed for the position. I do support the hire, but I have to abstain in the official vote.
Thank you. So when we take action on those, there will be separate votes and not on the consent agenda.
Oh, you know what, I have one more, sorry, this is the resignation. I'm also bringing forward Samantha Massa Haas as the Danbury Elementary School guidance counselor, sorry about that, I had too many files.
I'm going to refer Sue to you for those names.
Absolutely.
Okay, we are now at item 9G, which is the Danbury Elementary School configuration and a recommendation from Superintendent Buckley. I believe is in the packet.
I started this position and was asked, Anne had asked me to meet and talk about the fifth grade students who are currently Danbury residents but attending school at Bristol Elementary School, and whether it was possible to have the fifth grade return back to Danbury. We actually met twice, had lengthy conversations about this. We talked about curriculum, we talked about instruction, we talked about how that would look, what the projections look like, and it is my recommendation that we move the fifth grade back to Danbury Elementary School. I think it's in the best interest of all students. It lowers our class size at Bristol Elementary School. We can do it. It will create a combination fourth and fifth grade classroom, which we met with the teacher as well, who is more than capable of doing a combination classroom. One of my concerns was the instructional piece of that, and they met extensively. They talked about it. They demonstrated to me that they can make this work. They can make it happen to stay true to our curriculum. So it is my recommendation. I think it is good for kids to do this. So, and it costs us nothing. I think in the long term, class sizes coming up are still small at Danbury where we can maintain that. One of my other concerns was, are we going to be flopping fifth grade? And it seems like over the next couple of years, we could absolutely keep them there in fifth grade. I also did add on my proposal that I don't know that this making the decision has anything to do with the K-8. I think every other school goes to fifth grade, that there's really no reason why Danbury can't continue and maintain at fifth grade. So it's my recommendation that we allow Danbury elementary students in fifth grade to return back to Danbury Elementary School.
Any questions, discussion, Dawn?
I noticed in grade second and third would be creating 23 students when they're fourth and fifth. Is that been considered as being feasible?
23 is. I mean, those numbers will fluctuate a little bit. And one of the things we'll continue to look at, and this is that whole conversation around even students in the wrong schools. Like, what does that look like? If everybody was in the right school, would that still be high or low? We'll continue to watch it. It's not unheard of to have a class size of 23. We have it in other schools.
No.
We have
but-
25 in other schools.
But they're not combined
Combined,
grades.
yep. Yep. I think the resources are there at this point to be able to do that.
Do you anticipate any parental objection?
I don't. I'm looking at you guys and no. I actually think probably parents will be ecstatic with this move.
And what
I don't know
effect
where
does
they
it,
Yeah.
what effect does it have on Bristol staffing?
It doesn't have any effect. What it does, it allows us to have more reasonable class sizes at Bristol.
And that has been a complaint from Bristol
Mm.
parents, so.
Yeah.
And last year, the kindergarten was separate.
Correct. This year it's going to be a K-1 combination, again, because of numbers.
And that's not gonna be an issue with the first graders.
Yeah. I actually think probably K-1 is a little easier than 4-5.
Any other comments? Did we want to hear from Ann or Jen on this at all?
If they'd like to add anything, we've met several times and I think they support it.
Yeah, again, it came, from our faculty, it was a discussion that we had about how to best serve all of our students in Danbury. We actually missed our fifth graders, and so we felt after a year of doing multi-age and the success that we had, it would be a great opportunity to bring them back and work that out. So we have several coming back for summer school with us right now that are enjoying themselves, that friendships are bonding again. It's really nice to see. We had some parent, that were hoping that would take place. And so again, through the entire community, with the support of our staff, with parent support, we brought this forward, and we appreciate you, having this opportunity and the discussion to have this happen for our small community.
Sorry it took so long. Okay, is there any objection to putting item 9G on the consent agenda? Hearing none. We will add that to the consent agenda. Which brings us now to item H, 9H, the Data Task Force version 4 spreadsheet. Hopefully we'll have a lively discussion. Dawn, would you care to kick this off as chair of the DTF? Included in the packet this evening was a color-coded new version of the Data Task Force spreadsheet. I just want to kind of give you a visual. It's also out on the SAU4 website. And I will defer to Dawn at this point and make comments subsequently.
What we did, we made the decision that continuing to track the 16 other school districts on the initial data analysis would it would be more appropriate, having gone through the special ed study, that we use those schools as the cohorts rather than the prior ones. Several of those still are the cohorts that were in that initial 16. Also, we decided not to do a comparison with 2011 data, that we would just use the 2012 data for the comparison with this study. But we'll still maintain the 2010 data from the original data analysis for Newfound. And also, we decided to go ahead and put in the 2013 budgeted amounts for the dollar amounts like on the first page, so they can see a comparison against what had been budgeted, as well as this is the first year of the $2 million reduction. So we're kind of getting a head start on looking at the effect of the $2 million reduction in the budget. And Vinnie went through and color-coded them. As you can see it as to the green being, a good valuation, and red being a negative valuation, and then shades in between. So you can easily pick out where it's felt that we're below our cohorts in achieving that line item.
Mind if I jump in here?
No.
Actually, the color coding denotes, in terms of sequence, high to low, not positive to negative so much, because that's a relative opinion. So the highest number would be denoted in red, and the lower number would be bright green, and it's shades of green, yellow, orange, and red, depending on what the range is. And what I want to point out on this is that we started with this with 2010 newfound data, and so in the far left column, you have 2010 newfound data, and it was the ranking that at the time we had compared to the 16 other districts, as Don noted. 2011 data is in the column next to that, and that is the ranking that we had at that time. The 2012 data, is the current data that is being compared to the other cohort districts. So that's why you see really from essentially here over, you have the newfound comparison to the other 6 districts. But we also put in, for information purposes, under this yellow highlighted top column, the fact that this is what the current budgetary numbers look like, but without a ranking. So if anybody wants to go through and do a careful analysis, kind of a black and white analysis, if you would, of where those newfound numbers would position us relative to the other cohorts, you need to do that manually. I did not do that ranking because it is not fair to the other districts, which also do not have their current data yet. We'll get that in the fall. That's when that ranking will be changed. Okay, is that clear? The other thing that I think Dawn has finished is adding some additional information toward the end. You want to comment on that, Dawn? And that would be coming out as version 5 when it's completed, and would also be put out on the SAU4.org website.
So today I completed looking at the test score data and doing the comparisons and putting in the 11, 12, and not 13 on the test, 13 on the test scores. And then the college completions, I put in the data on 11, 12, and 12 for the cohorts, but not 13 because that's not at the state at this time on the completeness. And then on the economic data, again, I included 11, 12, and 13 No, not 13 for the economic data, 11 and 12 for Newfound, and then 12 for the cohorts. And also I added the assessed valuations for each district for 12.
So that information will broaden our ability to compare ourselves a little more accurately.
Right. From
And that-
an economic perspective, what effect
Yeah, some individuals,
thinks, there's studies that claim that the economic condition of a district has an effect on the performance of the students. So that will just give us a relative value that we can judgmentally compare to. And then the last line items is the employee salaries. So I've included the teachers, superintendent, and the business administrator salaries for 11, 12, and 13 for Newfound, and then also 12 for the cohorts.
and that'll become version 5, right, Don?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. What's out on the web right now is the current version, version 4, which is up to date, but it's constantly being altered. We are using this as a fundamental basis of comparison of our district to others, and is what I think was the basis for us to discuss budgetary differences a year or two ago. Any comments from Superintendent Buckley or Dan, who played an integral role in keeping this data for us?
I would like to thank you all for the data. It's a lot of work. This is something that we will certainly use as we start to look at where we are, where we're going, what are concerns of the board. I can tell you a lot of the 7s or the higher areas that are validly high, that were, kind of on the more expensive side, are areas we're looking at. Ann and I have had lots of conversations about paras and how we're using them, what we're using them for. And so that will be something, it's a little bit more of a longer term project in the sense of it's not gonna happen overnight, but it will be something that we've absolutely had the dialogue around. There's some things that we might wanna think about creatively. So for example, you have nurses on here. We have a nurse in every school. The struggle with that is, when you have a place like Danbury that's small and you have a full-time nurse, a half-time nurse because the accident happens that when the nurse isn't there. There are some things inherently in having smaller schools creates the higher cost, and we need to either think outside of the box to look at that, or just know that that's always going to be a cost factor. That when you have smaller schools, you have to staff them that way. There are things we can look at. We can look at paras. We can look at the support services we have and how can we more effectively do that. There's some areas that we are low on that concerns me, such as building plants, the building needs. So we are one of the lowest costs on that. Is that at a cost of some of our buildings not being in as great of shape as they should be? So I think, we'll be doing those holistic looks at a lot of the data points to really determine, is being a 2 where we want to be? Because we may say, you know what, we're number 1 on the cheapest with our buildings, but that may not be the best thing for us.
Right.
So we need to just really, I think we need to peel the layers around these and say, where do we want to be? Maybe we want to be number 1, maybe we want to be number 7. Where are our priorities? But we certainly are looking at those things.
Yeah, I think you bring out a valid point. Some of the color coding here doesn't make sense regarding what it's referencing. We're number 7 in Medicaid revenues. Well, that's almost a good thing, given the amount of paras we have, that we're actually billing Medicaid for services.
What line item are you looking at, Joe? It's numbered.
80. Well, it's the ranking, 80, so 79.
Right. And I think, Jeff, to your point, is you have to look at that. On the flip side of it, You could also say, boy, we're getting a lot in Medicaid to this, and so it's a direct correlation, the amount we're getting back from Medicaid to the number of services we're providing to the number of students who are Medicaid eligible. So if we're getting more back, does it mean, and these are where we have to dig a little deeper, does it mean that we have more students who are Medicaid eligible, or does it mean we're providing more services that are Medicaid eligible reimbursed than other districts? So you have to kind of peel the onion layer back
Right.
to really look at why that is.
Right, I
Right.
just want to correct the perception that it doesn't make sense. The red indicates the highest number, and as Stacy indicates,
That's always
that
the
may
best.
be a necessary thing. For example, in our transportation budget, we are
Right.
likely to be high because we're the second largest district in the
Right,
state.
but all I'm pointing out is that the colors chosen doesn't necessarily send the right message. People could make assumptions based on the color that aren't necessarily so.
Just
Well-
because it's red doesn't mean it's always bad.
Yeah,
Right.
that's my point.
Like I
That's why
did.
I wanted to correct the statement
That
that,
I made.
the judgmental statement that red is bad. It's not bad, it's just the high number. And in some cases, the high number may be appropriate. Or in some cases, the green number, in the opinion of some at the very low end of the spectrum, may be a bad thing. But that's personal opinion. Nonetheless, it is the low number. That's all the color codes depict now, because the criticism was, and rightfully so, that it was judgmental the first time. And that when we pointed that out, it was prudent to make that change. So I tried to be consistent in just doing high to low, and that's all the color coding is. It's far easier to see, as this tool provides us, where we rank by color code. And I know that the elementary schools have adopted color coding on student analysis. So someone thought it was a good idea.
Yeah,
In
they're
any-
into primary colors down there.
Yes.
I still like black and white, yeah.
In any case, this is nothing more than a tool, but I assure you that this is an improvement from making decisions based on gut feel. We're making decisions based on data, and we're using that data to point us in the direction and then do detailed analysis. It is not just being relied upon, but rather use of, as a map, if you will, to put us in the right direction. So with that said, I encourage people to continue to look at it, be familiar with it, and to debate with us whatever your position may be, based on the data and the facts that are before us. Any further discussion on the data task force update?
I was, I had a concern about administrators, and I'm not sure if that is a true number, so my concern is just, is that real? Because we are so much lower than everybody.
What column are you looking at? What line?
Column, it's line 34, the number of administrators that we have,
And column?
and column?
Yes. There's 4
The
columns
year.
for
All right,
Newfound.
I'm looking at the gray column for Newfound,
Okay,
okay?
that is a change with the current budget. It's projected against the other numbers, but there's no ranking. That's clear, right?
Because it's a lot lower than everybody except White Mountain. Teachers and administrators are low, and every other person on the payroll is higher than other schools. So, I mean, whose administration? The principals?
Principals, there's 2 types of administrators. There's building administrators, which include
Yeah.
a principal or an assistant principal.
Yeah.
And there's an SAU administrator, which would include a superintendent, myself, or the student services administrator.
So that's 8 with the principals, the 3 of you. Then what? You have vice
Well,
principal?
last year, we didn't have a student services administrator.
Okay. I know, I'm just I was just looking at that 9.6. That's
Yeah.
when we have everybody employed? That's what we'll have?
No, that's what we had for 2013.
When every position is filled, I mean.
Well, 2013 was last year.
Okay.
You're in FY14 now, so
Okay.
I'm reporting what was in place for 2013.
Okay, I gotcha. So going forward, it will go up now that we've replaced.
It would be an increase of 1.
Okay, all right.
This is not a morning's perusal worth of effort. You have to study this, get familiar with it, ask questions to really understand the data. Jeff?
Something just jumped out at me that I almost choked.
Yeah.
We're projected to have more students for 2013.
Where are you looking?
2013, you're looking backwards now. 2013 is over
Well, I'm talking the projected number here of
For the-
1259.
for the year that ended a month ago.
That's how many there were in October.
Okay.
It's projected in the sense that that column is gonna be compared to the other 6 cohorts in the fall, when the other 6 cohorts report their numbers. Okay?
Yeah.
And
So
that was-
the date at the top of the column is the ending date of the school year. So that's
Correct.
the projected column is 2012, 2013.
Correct, and it's not ending. It was the enrolled students the day I filled out that box.
And the other, again, to reiterate, the other detail here is that the 2012 column says most recent. That is what's being compared and ranked to the other current cohort districts. Okay? We debated whether to put in the 2013 information because it might confuse people, but that's why I wanted to talk about it this evening, to make it clear that that's there on an FYI basis because we had a significant reduction in that budget. And people may want to know where we rank. For example, if you look at line 9, the annual rate of increase in Fund 10, everyone else went up except Winnisquam, which had a 0.3% reduction, and we had a 6.9% reduction for 2013. Okay, but if you compare us with the other districts, we ranked as 4th compared to the other 6 districts total, with a 5.2% increase for the prior year. But since then, we've reduced things significantly, which is why we're down 6.9%. So this takes some discussion and some very detailed analysis, and we encourage people to look at it to try to find things that might be wrong, because it's a tool for us to look at areas that we want to make sure has correct information. And if someone finds bad data, and it's very important to let us know. It's public information. There could be errors. Okay, without further discussion on this, that would bring us to item, that being 9H is complete, and we'll have 9J now. Introduction of the new Student Services Coordinator and the SPED Quality Report.
Quarterly.
Quarterly report, so.
So you have the report in your packet that Dan completed, it was prior to Ann, so we said, what are we filling out? But I did ask Ann, I would, for those who have, I think you all have met Ann at this point in time, I did ask her, which kind of ties into the report, to talk just a little bit about how she spent her first month, because I think the board would like to hear kind of already what we have done to kind of change the surface.
Right, and if you don't mind just introducing yourself to the folks at home with your full name and where you're from, a little bit of background,
Sure.
that sort of thing.
I'm Ann Holton. I live in Alexandria. I'm a parent of children in the district. And previously, I was the special education director for Franklin and Hill school districts. Very excited to be on board here in Newfoundland, my home district. And I know that through the interview process, from reading the special education report that you had commissioned, one of the goals that I've been charged with is trying to reduce the amount of contracted services within the budget. Some of that had been started before I got here. For example, a speech-language pathologist was hired as an employee instead of using a contracted service agency for that. Occupational therapy is another area that we do use a contracted service for. I interviewed a couple of candidates and did not think that they could meet our needs. So what I did was I negotiated with the contractor, and they've reduced our rate by 12%. For this coming year, we'll get the same level of service with the same provider, but have to pay 12% less. And I would propose advertising for that occupational therapist position earlier in the year next year, so that we have a larger pool of candidates to select from. Another position that we've been doing interviews for is a school psychologist position, which ties into another contracted service agreement that There's been a contracted service at the high school for some counseling. Stacy and I have had some conversations about trying to kind of rein that in also to an employee. So we're still looking for a school psychologist to be able to cover the counseling piece as well as the evaluation and the other responsibilities of a school psychologist. And that will save a significant amount of money from the budget. There was an autism coordinator position that was a contracted service position that was grant funded that we have eliminated. So that is a savings out of one of the grants. One thing that I will be bringing to you is with some of that savings, part of my responsibility is to really focus on what's going on in the district, to look at the data, to make sure that we're providing services, high quality services to the students as effectively as possible. In addition, we have students, as you know, who are placed out of district. And so case managing and doing those meetings all over the state and trying to work on plans to get them back, as well as focusing on all the needs in the Newfound Area School District, one area would have to suffer for one person to do both. So what I will be bringing to you at the next meeting is creating a part-time out-of-district coordinator position so that that person could focus on those students to develop plans to get them back in. And that would be paid out of grant funding if it is approved.
And that was a conversation Ann and I had as we started to really, peel back the onion again and find, how are we going to do this? One of the concerns was the number of out-of-district students. And so that is a full-time job to really get out there to the schools to see the students. One is to manage them within their program and making sure that their IEP needs are being met, that they are making progress. One of the things we don't want to do is just place a student out of district at, $100,000 and have them just warehoused, that somebody else can manage them as opposed to us. And so we would be looking at this position and in getting out to these placements to really look at our students, what their needs are, and then coming back to the district and helping us identify how can we meet those students' needs here in the district. What programs do we need? What resources do we need to be able to do that cost effectively and successfully? Because the last thing we want to do is bring a student back from out of district and have it be unsuccessful. And so providing that opportunity of a part-time person would allow us the ability to really hone in on those students and then focusing really on the district and how we're providing services and what we're doing to, again, ultimately look at how can we do this more cost effectively and efficiently, and making sure our paraprofessionals and our special ed teachers have the resources and the training and professional development that they need. So you will likely hear that at your next meeting, more on that.
Any questions?
How do you like it so far?
I love it.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Care to comment on our report at all?
The numbers look pretty stable. I mean, the slight reductions look like it's mostly due to a decrease in enrollment overall, as opposed to eliminating positions. One thing that, was kind of brought to light in discussing this report with Stacy and Dan was kind of the different roles in the district of special education teachers, where some really work all the time as teachers and some are more case managers, and in some schools they do both. And that's one of the things that I will be looking at, is to make sure that the students' needs are being met in the most effective way, so that the IEPs can be written in a way that really is designed for that student.
One of the things that we had traditionally done, and that was the genesis of this quarterly review, was just to look at gross totals, which is indicated down at the very bottom of the matrix, in terms of total enrollment, which is now shown in quarter 2 at 1,251 students, and then the number of special education students, which quarter to quarter has dropped by 1. So there was a 17 student drop quarter to quarter, given total enrollment. So that then expanded as a result of the report into this detail that you see. And we agreed to just track this quarterly at the end of the calendar quarter, the following month's meeting, which puts you here in July. So. Do you have any questions of us?
Not at this point?
Okay, does anyone have any questions of Ann, Sue?
Well, actually, Dan, these enrollment figures are the figures from the end of the quarter?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
At the end of the quarter?
Yep.
On March 31st, that's how many students were enrolled.
Yep.
On June,
30.
well, whatever the last day of class was,
Yeah.
how many students were enrolled.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't necessarily correlate to the ADM figure we talk about.
Right, yeah.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, we're now at item 9K, the field trip.
We have a request from the high school for, it's an overnight field trip. It's actually an overnight conference for the I-3 grant we receive, and it will be several teachers, administrators, and a few students who will be attending. It's I want to say 2 days, 6 to 8, yeah, 2 days. It's at the Courtyard Marriott in Nashua. And so they're looking for permission. Basically, it's because there are students involved. And they're there as part of the student voice for the I-3 grant and how the student voice is reflected in that grant and in our schools.
Any questions, discussion?
Well,
Sue?
Well, I'm wondering, how are these students chosen for this? Does anyone know?
Question. Let me see. I want to say they've been part of, to be part of the I-3 grant, it's a lot of student voice, all of those. I want to say they were probably part of the project through this last year and good
Right.
representatives of the high school. Just going to see if they have anything specifically on this.
If you were to step back into 106, which is a room that sometimes used to be in non-public, you'd see a lot of I-3 documentation, which includes the names of the students who are ongoing participation in the project and how to best provide students a voice in the process.
Any objection to including item 9K on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and add it. To 12K on the agenda as well. Ooh, we don't have a 12K, Sue.
Oh,
Missed that one. Page 4, wait a minute, page 5. We have 3, 6. Yep, we missed 12K, okay. That brings us now to item L, surplus.
This is budget surplus, this is not budget surplus, this is surplus property. You have a fairly common motion from me that happens periodically to declare certain surplus property surplus in accordance with policy DN. The one item in particular that is going to look different on this request is a 2002 Dodge Ram van with liftgate. I've included the VIN. This is a vehicle that was used by the food service group until the end of 2007, at which point a box truck was purchased and has been in use for the last 6 years. For the last 4 or 5 years, with minor ongoing repairs and maintenance, we've been allowed the facilities group to use this vehicle in facilities maintenance. However, it's gotten to the point where it is really not worth investing any more money in repairing it. It would be a significant expense to get it, at this point, to get it roadworthy. And the facilities group does have one other vehicle that they can use, so we'll just surplus this out, take it off the insurance, take it off the rolls, and be done with it.
What will happen to that?
It'll be advertised for bid. It'll go to the highest bidder. If we receive no bids, we'll offer it to the towns, like the other surplus property issues we have, and if the towns don't want it, we'll scrap it.
Okay.
Maybe Good News Garage can use it.
Is it inspectable?
It's not at this point, which is why we would rather surplus it out rather than invest the money in fixing it.
Okay.
Any questions on surplus recommendations from Dan?
What were the green and white flags?
I gather many years ago there might have been a color guard at the school.
Oh, yeah, I thought it meant for
And,
schools or something.
yeah, a color guard of some sort, really not sure.
At graduations, maybe.
Possibly, these were from the middle school, and the building administrator requested that we get it out of the way, they don't have a color guard.
Okay, any objection to this item 12 or 9L going on to the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and add that. So that brings us to other business as recommended or requested by Dan for this meeting, which is item 9Z1. For lack of a better term, I would like to call this Article 4, Preparation, Discussion, and Motion. You may recall that during the deliberative session, the school board had asked for Article 4 to be passed by the voters, which would give the right to the school board to retain a fund balance. And at this point, I would turn this over to Dan and ask for him to comment.
What I've handed to you is the motion that I've offered with a blank in the dollar sign, in the motion reading, to retain some portion of the unassigned fund balance as a retained fund balance for use in accordance with provisions of RSA 198-4B2 as adopted by the voters of the Newfound Area School District. The second page in what I've handed you tonight is a document that DRA provided me per my discussion with them in trying to calculate what the capacity was, or what our legal limit would be for retention. Line 6 on the left-hand side indicates that the maximum we could retain, if we chose to, would be $377,795. That's higher than the number we've discussed in the past, and I want to just be clear that that's valid. Historically, or as we've had these discussions, we talked about a number that was based on the $12 million, $11.5 million local assessment. But DRA calculates it as both the local plus the local state tax that's retained locally for a total of just a little over 15 million, and that's the local assessment. It doesn't include equitable aid, but it does include those two numbers, which is how they calculate the capacity at 377. As of today, we're having our audit approaching draft completion. We believe that we have availability, an unretained fund balance at this point, prior to any motion on this subject, of $374,220. That is after, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure it's clear, that's after the $60,000 that's pushed to the Building Maintenance Trust as part of another warrant article, but because that was voted, that's not negotiable. It was voted yes, the capacity is there in the fund balance, it goes. What's left after that is what's referred to currently as the unretained fund balance, which we're where we are.
The health insurance rebate, for lack of a better word, is that on the next year or is that on this year?
The health insurance transactions will all take place in the current year, which is FY14.
Okay.
So the
it's
year
not
after
in-
the year that these numbers we're talking about, correct?
It's not included in this
That is
then?
correct.
Okay.
So you could theoretically retain the whole $374,000 and still have $300,000 go back to the taxpayers in the form of the rebate from the insurance company.
Right, okay, thanks.
Right, which is what we're looking at so far.
Yeah.
This is a very healthy number. And I'm surprised that it's that high, but this is what we need for next budgeting cycle to be less generous on contingencies, in my opinion, which is how it was presented to the voters. The voters approved it, and I think that gives us a voter-controlled, public hearing required arrangement to spend this money if we need to, as a contingency. So it's not something we would be able to do at a whim if we decide to retain it. But it is something that I think we have worked a long time to get things to this point, between the tax cap, fiscal prudence, and then the amount of money that we are now showing here to be available. So I'm glad to see this in the hopes that we will be able to budget significantly less next year for some line items.
Having looked at heating bills and knowing the turmoil in Egypt is having a very unhappy effect on oil prices, I think the availability of a good source of funds, should heating oil go through the roof, is a very big issue. I think we need to retain as much as we can so that we don't have, if unthinkable happens, we don't have to turn around and sting the taxpayers.
Yeah, and that's the intent behind it, to retain a fund balance, which school districts have previously been unable to do, but with the change in the law, that allows us to. It is 2.5%, and it's a bigger number. That's what Dan just explained. Originally, it was just money raised by local taxes, but that now includes the other.
Includes the state tax on education, which is retained locally, which is why it's 2.5% of the $15 million number instead of 2.5% of the $11.5 million number.
Okay, then I misunderstood. I thought it was 2.5% of the surplus.
No, the surplus is 2.5% of the local funds raised by taxes, including the additional funds.
It's a much more meaningful number than what you would.
How much of this money is state money?
It's all local money.
It's all local money.
The 15 million? Is that the question? It's just,
Yeah.
it's broken out in two lines on your tax bill. There's the local appropriation for schools, and then there's the state tax to support education.
Right. Right, but I was asking of the 15 million.
Yeah, it's all local.
Well, did you mean how much is the local part of the state tax that we are retaining? Is that what you mean?
100%.
The local taxes paid for education.
Not every town pays a tax of that nature. The donor towns pay it into other districts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother conversation that I'd rather not confuse this conversation. The taxes raised locally as a district is the 15,111,000, and we can retain up to 2.5% of it.
So Dan, would your motion then really read to retain the amount determined by audit?
No.
Well, you're suggesting the audit draft is going to be different.
I would advise you to retain something a little less than the audit, so that, because once again, this is audit draft, and things still need to be tightened up in these final days of the summer. But I would, if it were me sitting on the board making the motion, I might make a motion such as a motion to retain $365,000 or $350,000 of the unassigned fund balance, and have a small fund balance, because that's gonna go back to the taxpayers anyway. That small amount's gonna go back to the taxpayers. But it also gives you the, if something comes up 2 weeks from now in the finalization of the audit, that's a $5,000 or $10,000 fluctuation. We don't wanna go through this process again.
Right, or we could wait until August to do it.
You could. However, there are substantial, they can't finalize the audit without your number, because that has to be part of the calculation. And we also have a substantial amount of reporting to complete before the end of August. I need to come to you at your August meeting with the DOE 25 complete so you can sign it. And I would need that number for that as well.
Which is why you came to this meeting tonight prepared.
Yes. The days are getting shorter, Grasshopper.
We're gonna miss you, Dan.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd like to take 2 seconds on that notion. I will tell you that just in the month I've worked with Ann and Stacy, you're in good hands. From my side of the house, you're absolutely in good hands. The work I've seen the two of them work together and with me and with each other, as it affects my little world of the budget, you're in great hands.
Good, it's good to hear.
So you're looking for a number.
What number would you like?
Looking for a motion.
Well, the motion is drafted.
I make the motion
To
that
retain
$350.
Yeah, second.
$350,000 of the unassigned fund balance as a retained fund balance for use in accordance with provisions of RSA 198-4-B2 as adopted by the voters of Newfound School District.
Second.
Okay, when the time comes to act on that, we will do so. We'll put that number in for now as a result of discussion. Is there further discussion on it? I'm glad to see that this has finally come to fruition and that the voters have faith in us to administer things accordingly and have given us this capability so that we can continue to manage the district with some fiscal restraint. This will give us the opportunity, as I mentioned, when it comes budget time, to be a little bit less generous on contingency items, knowing that that money is available. Jeff's point is well taken, that heating oil could be, the big hit this year.
Don't we contract a price on that for the year?
I can't tell you, we are out to bid right now, bid to do this week. I will be able to, we're budgeted this year at $3 a gallon. I will be able to report to you at your next meeting what we've contracted for the coming winter. And I will also advise you that, as has been requested at various times in the past, for me to take any interested parties to add to our volume and hopefully gain a volume, an increase in our volume discount. The town of Bristol requested to participate this year in our quantity, and we've included their quantities in our bid quantity, but it would be billed separately.
Excellent. Okay. That takes care of the other business item that was readdressed. So we're now at public comment, I believe. Yes. We're at item 10, public comment only on agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to comment? Okay. Seeing, I'm sorry, Fred?
Fred Robinson from Danbury. Dan, I know you don't have to give me an answer, but just sort of as a clarification, the money that you're talking about as your fund balance that you're going to be retaining, I heard you say it goes back to the towns if it doesn't get used, correct?
No. The fund balances that they will potentially vote to retain will stay with the district for use in accordance with the provisions of that RSA as the voters authorize them to do. So that money doesn't go back to the towns. What will go back to the towns because of the direction we're taking is the money being returned, the premium surplus being returned by LGC of approximately $300,000.
Okay, so if that $350,000, if you vote on that, if that does not get spent.
It can't get spent without public hearing. Just so you're aware, that's part of the provision of the RSA.
All right.
It stays with the district as an emergency fund, for lack of a better term, and the board can only authorize the expenditure of it with a public hearing and the various other provisions.
Yeah, there are various.
Or they can use it in a future year to reduce taxation if they choose to do it. But it stays with the district.
I just seem to remember part of the discussion at the meeting where the people voted on this, that the idea was that money was going back to the town if it was not being spent.
No. No, surplus money will go back to the town, such as the delta between 350 and 374. And in this case, this year,
Right.
the LGC rebate, for lack of a better term, that will go back to the town to reduce taxes. This money is explicitly given to the school board as an opportunity to vote on the motion before us to determine whether we want to. If the motion passes, then we will retain that balance in the number of, if it's proposed at 350,000. But it's very restricted money. It's not something we can pull out and use for something at a whim at the end of the fiscal year. There are very deliberate governances that are part of allowing that money to be spent. That's part of the RSA. That was made explicitly clear. So there will be a public hearing if we want to use those funds.
Okay, now that money then carries over into the budgeting process for the next year if it's not spent?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to be clear, it doesn't carry into the budgeting process. The money stays on the books and in the accounts of the district. It's a
As
separate
available.
line item, broken out separately. And in the budgeting process for next year, two things. Number one, the 2.5% number has to be recalculated every year.
Yes.
And number two, the board, one of the allowable uses of it is that the board could use it and release it a year from now to reduce taxation.
Okay, maybe that's the part
That,
that I.
if they saw a sudden jump in the budget and they wanted to stay within the tax cap, they could release it to reduce taxation a year from now if they wanted,
Okay.
Right, or we could defeat the motion this evening and it would go back
immediately,
to the
right?
towns immediately as part of the other money.
Well,
So it's
But-
like a capital
All right, thank
reserve
you.
fund,
Exactly,
but it's limited
it is,
and it can be returned.
it can.
And you
So that's
can't,
the differentiation from a capital reserve.
you can't
But-
add to it another 2.5% next
Right.
year.
You have to
Next
calculate the
year,
200% of local taxation on a year-to-year basis.
It's a cap,
Again.
It is capped.
yeah. Don?
And the money doesn't go back to the towns, it goes back in a reduced tax rate, right?
Well, it goes back to the towns,
As a reduced tax rate.
As a
It
credit,
doesn't,
sort
the
of.
money.
yeah, that's a.
The actual money
It's a
doesn't-
misnomer to
It
say
goes
that the
into the
money goes to
calculation
the
of the
town.
additional revenues to reduce the impact of the current appropriation.
Right, and so the taxes paid to run the schools are
Yeah.
reduced
Reduced.
for the town
The money
for
actually
that
doesn't go
period
back.
of time. Yes, it sounds like we have a public comment. From- Could you just state your name for the record and your town?
So it sounded like there was two separate figures, the 374 that we could retain, and then a surplus balance, the LGC, which was a 350? Is that
That's not a
correct? Two
surplus
different
balance,
numbers?
that's a return premium for prior years,
Okay,
and that number is approximately 300.
but that's, okay, so that's two different numbers, so if tonight you decided, you made your motion to retain the 350, that's an additional 24,000 that would go back to the taxpayers, so it would be really 324,000 that you're talking to go back to the taxpayer?
Two things, if I may?
Yeah, go
Two
ahead.
things, that's an approximate number, and the money doesn't actually physically go back to the taxpayers. It goes into the calculation of how much they have to pay in
For the next
for the
year.
next year based on the current appropriation.
Okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you for that, those clarification questions under public comment. Anyone further? Okay. We're now at item 11, the consent agenda. The items are listed on the board, on the white pad. Is there any changes to the consent agenda as agreed prior? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as noted?
So moved.
Moved by Paul. Seconded by Lloyd. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? No one's excused. The vote passes 7-0. It's approved as noted. Okay, we're now moving on to action items on discussion items, which brings us all the way down to, in order to do so, bear with me a moment. Item 12F, which we split. Item 12F1, the chair will entertain a motion to elect Julie Mahoney as nominated by the superintendent.
So moved.
Moved by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that would be, anyone opposed? Okay, and any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, 2 abstentions. The vote is 5 in favor, no one opposed, with 2 abstentions, those being Groton and Danbury. That now moves us to item 12F. 2. And I'm going to need a little help on this, Stacy, to a motion, the chair will entertain a motion to elect Melissa Markey, Murphy Rainville, and
Two others.
Sarah Old and Samantha Massahos.
you're going to have to help me with that one.
Massahos.
And the spelling of Sarah's last name?
OHL.
Okay. Just 1 second, please. Okay, the motion is to elect Melissa Markey, Murphy Rainfield, Sarah Ohl, and Samantha Massapot.
So moved.
Moved by Paul, is there a second?
Yep.
Seconded by Jeff. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the vote is 7-0. Now brings us to item 12K and L. We're on the consent agenda. And I believe we have a motion proposed by Dan, which was discussed earlier, for item 12Z1, which is the fund balance.
I don't think Dan can make motions. can
No,
he?
it was proposed by Dan.
Oh,
That's
okay.
correct. That's what I'm referring to, is item 12Z1.
But Paul did move it.
And Paul modified it to include the number of 350,000. So is that your motion, Paul?
That's my motion.
Okay, it now reads to retain $350,000 of the unassigned fund balance as a retained fund balance for use in accordance with the provisions of RSA 198:4-B, Section 2, as adopted by the voters of the Newfound Area School District. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Don Franklin. Further discussion? Okay, as noted, were these funds, were this motion to be defeated, these funds would be included as part of a fund surplus that would go to reduce the taxes for the school district subsequently. Again, this was proposed by the school district, advocated by the school board at the deliberative session, and the voters approved, giving us what was then noted as Article 4, the authority to retain this balance, which is reserved by very restrictive state rules and law for us to use for emergency purposes. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining from.
Is that an abstention,
Yeah.
Ruby? Okay. One abstention, that being Danbury. Okay, as per attached. This was approved 601. Okay. We are now at item 13. Where's 13? Oh, skip 13. All right, we'll go to 15. We just misnumbered here on the agenda. I missed it. Double checking here. Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't miss it.
13's
Yeah,
manifest.
13's manifest.
Sorry about that, Sue.
That's okay.
Manifest, item 13. Are there manifests for us to approve?
Well, we've been on vacation a long time, but I'm thinking we didn't meet after the end of June. The manifests were signed for June, so we need to approve them. I don't believe we approved those. I'm not
Correct.
seeing it, yeah. So I move to approve the manifests for the month of June 2013.
A second.
Okay, moved to approve June 2013 manifests. Moved by Sue, seconded by Jeff. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstention?
I was an aye. I didn't say it, but I was.
Did you abstain?
No, I'm an aye. I just didn't get it out. I was distracted.
The motion's approved. Okay, we're now at announcements. And I have an announcement relative to plans for Superintendent Buckley and I to attend local select board meetings upcoming on a schedule that's been approved by each of the select boards to date, with Groton pending. Starting on August 5th, you're all invited to attend if you care to do so. I thought it would be appropriate for us to go around and introduce the new superintendent to the various select boards and just talk about what might be on their mind. Recall that I did this last year, just as your chair, to go around and enhance communications by speaking to the select boards, answering any questions that may come up. And that's what we're doing on August 5th with Bristol, August 22nd with Bridgewater. Danbury is August 28th, New Hampton is August 29th, in Hebron on September 5th, and in Alexandria on September 10th. The Groton meeting is currently scheduled for September 24th. We're waiting confirmation. So I would encourage any of you that might be interested to attend.
I have an announcement for the camera, more than anything. We had a meeting this week in town about expanding broadband service to residents, and out of that came information from Comcast, who delivers cable to parts of our town, that if any child receives or qualifies for a free and reduced hot lunch and they are in a Comcast served area, they can get the internet for $9.95 a month until they graduate, as long as they continue to qualify. There are also qualifications for homeschooled children, so that are similar, and they can also get a computer from Comcast for $150. So Ann is going to be sending home a notice in the back to school packet about that.
Sounds great.
Yep.
When was the Hebron meeting?
September 5th at 7 p.m. So that, your announcement was that Comcast will provide subsidized internet rate?
$9.95 plus tax per month. Yeah, if they qualify for free and reduced hot lunch.
That's expensive, isn't it?
$9.95 a month.
My dial-up's only $4.95.
No.
And you use it so well. This is my computer right here.
Of course, not all of town gets, is served. That's why we had our meeting.
Anyone else have an announcement? Any announcement? Okay, the attached calendar includes school events. I have a question for the board at this point, speaking of school events. I think there are those that may want to meet and greet the new superintendent at some point. I haven't had a chance to discuss this with you, Stacy, but I thought perhaps we could do so in public this evening. What do you feel might be a good idea to try to address that? Kind of sprung it on you here, but
For the public?
for just to hold some sort of meet and greet or some sort of welcome to the district, and whomever may want to attend, if we publicize this so that they can come and maybe bend your ear a little bit.
Yeah, we could do, I mean, just off the cuff. And we could do early evening, like coffee or tea, desserts, kind of a thing, and just
Okay.
have it kind of informally, where people can come in and talk about their concerns or what they
Right.
love about the district. And
Okay. Does anyone else have any concerns or comments about doing that, or
I think
ideas?
it's very important that we do it and make it well announced. Maybe even newspaper.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I had in mind, is a formal announcement of welcoming the new superintendent to the school district for the school year, and then we'll have to coordinate a time when it would be appropriate
Yep.
to do that. So I just want to kind of get you to think about that and
Yep.
maybe work out those
In fact, it
details.
might be worthwhile to invite a few reporters, see if we can get some newspaper coverage.
Who's the salesman now?
Okay. We can work that out,
Yep,
Stacy,
let me put
whenever.
something together.
I didn't hear you.
refreshments.
Oh. Or it'll be here.
Have good desserts and they will come.
Yes.
If you want a good turnout, you can have good donuts.
Yeah, the donut budget, right. Yeah, well, we should have a few bucks for that. Okay, the next regularly scheduled school board meeting is set for August 12th. And Superintendent Buckley proposes a planning and dialogue meeting, something we have not had for quite a while, which would focus on a review and overview of summer programs on August 26th. That is usually a 2-hour meeting with one topic, and that would be the intent to handle that subject on that evening. We do reserve the right to conduct business as necessary at such a meeting, given convenience matters and what have you, but we'll be creating an agenda for August 12th. Gosh, that's only
2 weeks.
10, 12 days, 2 weeks from tonight.
It is possible that I won't be here on the 26th.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that could be my first day of work.
Okay. So that's where we're at. Is there we're at item 17 now, which is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Paul and seconded by Ruby. Non-debatable motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you all for attending this evening.